Now
Oh,
you're.
all right.
Hey everyone, we're here for our next session. We have Jason and Nishant talking about facts versus myth, realities of Bitcoin mining with the former head of PR at Bitmain. I will let them take it from here.
All right. Thank you, Sinju. Just as a matter of introduction, my name is Jason, based here in Hong Kong. I'm the head of research for a crypto fund called Spartan Capital, and I also host a weekly podcast called Block Crunch, where I talk to developers and traders and investors in crypto.
Hi everyone, thanks Jason for the intro. I'm Nishant. I have been involved in the space full time since early 2014 when I joined a manufacturer of mining machines in Shenzhen. And then I later joined Bitmain, where I worked 4 years as the head of global PR. And I recently left to start my own PR firm in the space. Excited to be part of this discussion.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot of things that we can go through, and even before we started the panel, Nishan, you and I were talking about kind of the different things that are happening in the mining space and some of the myths that people seem to perpetuate about Bitcoin mining in particular. And I thought it would be very interesting to get your take as someone who's been in the belly of the beast, kind of working at Bitmain and within the mining industry for a long time, to kind of take a crack at some of these myths. So why don't we start with kind of some housekeeping first? Uh, we mentioned that we noticed there's been a sudden surge in hash rate on Bitcoin, almost about, I think, 33% earlier in April. And I think quite a few of us were kind of wondering what the heck is going on there. So since you were kind of in China and in the mining scene, then can you tell us about, what you saw there? What was behind that sudden surge?
It's interesting that you bring that sudden surge because the media, most of the international media was talking about it, was surprised because they were talking about how the hash rate is going down and it's just the beginning. And when halving comes, it'll just be even lower than what you see, because this was after huge drops in the hash rate. The sudden surge happened. The surge was because China had finally started opening up in near the end of March. All the supply chains opened up, people started going to work. And so when the supply chains opened up, the miners that were stuck in transit since Chinese New Year, which was in the end of January, finally reached their destinations at mining farms in China, which is where most of the mining farms are. And then they went online. So you saw this sudden surge. And also these miners are the latest gen, so they are way more powerful than the previous miners that were operating on the network. So yeah, it makes sense to see about more than 30% surge in 2 days.
Got it. So that the recovery and kind of hash rate came from as China started to open up the economy again.
Yes, totally. When the virus thing was less serious here.
Got it. Got it. That's interesting, and I think leading into some of the other points that I wanted to touch on. So first, I think it'd be good to go through. Oh, I think we just had a slight problem with the Wi-Fi, but yeah, as we wait for Nishan to come back, I think some of the things that we wanted to touch on include some of the high-level myths related to mining. So people are always talking about how mining is centralized in China and controlled by a few miners whose names we recognize. So we wanted to touch on that and see how much validity there is, how much concern there is, and what is the miners' take on this. And we also want to talk about decentralization of proof of work coins versus proof of stake coins, whether miners are trying to get into staking. Hey, Nishant,
Um,
you're back.
I dropped out for a short time, so can you repeat the question again?
Awesome. Yeah, no worries. I was just giving the audience
No.
kind of a breakdown of what we're going to go through. Um,
Cool.
why don't we start with the kind of high level myth that mining is centralized in China, it's controlled by a few miners. What do miners think about this? Is this a myth? Is there any concern or validity to this? How do you think about this?
I cannot deny that geographic centralization is a concern. Having said that, I don't think it should be too much China specific, because the problems of centralization that we see with mining is mainly because some pools have more hash rate than the others. It's not really too much about any other things. So most of the people who founded these pools in China, like Poolin, the co-founders there, who were good friends of mine when I was at Bitmain, because that's where they worked. They just co-founded BTC.com pool, and other pools, the ones that we see now and the ones that were really big 3-4 years ago. All these guys are Bitcoiners, just like Bitcoiners anywhere else. And that's something that Thomas Heller from F2Pool also recently pointed out in a podcast. And it's a great point. These guys do have the best interest of Bitcoin at heart, just like you and I or anyone in the world who's listening to this. So yeah, I don't think that's something to worry about. And on the other hand, there's another side to it. If the competition stays fair, which it is, then you will see the pools, the scenario of the hash rate distribution between pools changing drastically. So when I joined the space about 6 years ago, then the biggest pool at that time was ghash.io. And that's also the pool I first mined on ever in my life, because no one could have thought of mining on any other pool. It was just so big, and it was almost 45%. And that's when Vitalik also published an article on Bitcoin Magazine about it. When it touched 45%, and that was a big concern. Vitalik called it the big crisis of centralization in mining. And that now no one's even heard of that pool. Anyone who's joined the space since the last 3 years don't even know that pool ever existed. Most people don't know. When I joined Bitmain, Antpool was the de facto leader in the space. No one could have thought Antpool's going to go anywhere. And as I was head of PR there, we took a lot of criticism for owning the most competitive pools in the industry. And the top one was Antpool. And then Bitmain saw this issue as well. So we tried to solve it the best we could by setting up another pool, competing pool internally, totally open source, the first big, large-scale, 100% open source pool called BTC.com. And the team was separate. They were located in a separate office. The servers were located in geographically elsewhere to make the network more robust. And soon, BTC.com overtook Antpool. And then the guys who had founded BTC.com left Bitmain. And then they started another pool, which has overtaken both these two pools, F2 pool and Antpool. And now Poolin is the biggest pool along with the F2 pool, which has always been there in the top 5, fluctuating somewhere. And now it's the biggest at this moment. So my point being, the pools keep going and coming depending on who's more competitive, because, and this is also a proof of how the competition is fair, and a proof of how any other solutions that you hear about that claim to solve the problem of centralization of mining, or mining pools actually, are not going to make it any better. I mean, you already have fair competition among these pools and people competing and incentivized to run these pools. It cannot be better than this. Yeah.
So your point is that even though a lot of these miners are located in the same country, there hasn't been any signs that you've seen of collusion between these guys, because it's still a highly competitive space, and it will remain a highly competitive space.
Yeah, and the guys have the best interests of Bitcoin at heart, the guys running these pools, or any other Bitcoin startup in China.
Got it. Yeah, I think one of the reasons why people are really concerned about, centralization is, of course, the risk of collusion. And I think there are multiple papers written about miner extractable value, about how miners can collude and basically as maliciously attack the network and do dishonest mining, if economically it works out better for them. But from what you're saying, it sounds like that hasn't really been a concern amongst the miner community. In fact, it's quite a competitive community, at least between different pools.
Yeah. Also, why should it be a concern, considering most of the miners are in China?
Yeah, exactly.
Just kidding. I mean, but that's the truth. Most of the miners are in China anyway.
Right. And I think that's also leads to an interesting point, right? Because anecdotally, we've been hearing that there are a lot of stakers, validator businesses being set up in China as well. That seems like the second wave of kind of businesses in crypto that are coming, especially with the launch of a lot of these kind of proof of stake networks. And I know another myth. I don't know if you call it a myth, but another.
Before we move on, there's another thing here to note, that it's also because manufacturers are here. The supply chain is very efficient in China. So people are incentivized to set up the mining farms in China. And when mining farms are here, mining pools are incentivized to set up their nodes and their offices close to where the farms are. So it's also a lot about the people being at the right time and right place. Um, that you see a lot of the mining happening in China, and that can change with time because that's subject to a lot of variables. And we are seeing in the last 2 years a lot of new mining farms and data centers around the world in Russia and CIS region in US. A lot of all of our clients come from US and Russia. The clients of Blocksbridge Consulting, and all of our clients are large scale institutional miners. So yeah, we might see the geographic concentration of mining data centers themselves, not just the pools, also shifting.
And these are relatively newer players, right? The players that you're seeing in Russia and the US.
Yes, they're newer, they're yeah, better organized, and they are more process driven because they are funded by institutional investors, and their customers are institutional investors in the US, in Europe. So institutional investors, because of the due diligence that they require, would only invest in these kind of facilities rather than the make quick money kind of approach that mining farms in China usually adopt. Interestingly, we are seeing another trend at Blocksbridge Consulting, which is a lot of large and old miners in China are trying to adopt the best case practices of these organized mining facilities in US and Russia. That's because they want to also attract institutional money. And yeah, that's happening also.
So you're saying that the rise of kind of miners outside of China is driven by institutional capital, and the institutional capital wouldn't invest in anything that they don't know how to do due diligence on, which is, businesses in China, not where they're located. So that's why we've seen kind of the rise of these miners.
True, true. Yeah, most of the mining facilities in China have a shorter term approach. They want to make quick money in lesser time, which is understandable considering the regulatory uncertainties in China. And also, yeah, one interesting proof is that everyone talks about the wet season in China. Like
Yeah.
people turn on their farms when when the rains start, and then they turn it off. So like, really, that's not very long term or sustainable business.
Yeah, and back to a previous point, are you seeing any of the miners showing any interest in also running validator businesses as we see kind of more proof of stake networks come online, or is that not really a concern for most of the big miners? Are they still mostly focused on kind of running proof of work chains?
That's an interesting question. I do not know which side is bigger, but there are two sides to it. One, of course, the proof of work miners who've been doing it for a long time, who are not concerned with POS or interested in POS, and they continue to make money and grow their business of mining. Then there are some who see the potential of POS and believe, like many, that POS may have potential in the future. So they are investing in alternative things. So you have, for example, F2 pool branching out into stakefish to also capture a lot of the POS mining pool, POS pool market in the future. Yeah, we are seeing that.
And I guess this is another myth that people like to perpetuate, which is the idea that proof of work is more centralized than proof of stake because it's easier to gain economies of scale if you run a large operation with A6, whereas for proof of stake, anyone can technically gain access by just buying tokens on exchange and staking pretty easily. So what are your thoughts on that? And has there been discussions about the centralization of proof of work chains versus proof of stake chains within the miner community?
Sure. This is something that a lot of the mining community has considered because miners, the big miners that we see today, mining is institutionalized, industrialized. So people who are there have been there for a while and they understand it well. Now they got into it when others did not see mining or Bitcoin so seriously. That's how they grew with time, and so they are very forward-thinking and pragmatic people, and so they do consider POS, and there are a lot of discussions about it. Um, Now, like you mentioned yourself, the entry barrier. So now the entry barrier to mining goes beyond just buying the machines because it's also the availability of the machines, which goes beyond just Bitmain selling them to the chip, the fab, which is TSMC in Taiwan. And that is competing with, there you are competing for allocation from TSMC with Apple's, with NVIDIA, with AMD, and other chip giants or other electronic giants in the world. Now, that is one way the entry barrier is even higher, and it's not just about money that is stopping you from acquiring more stake, whether it's mining or whether it's POS. Um, so that way, proof of work surely seems more resistant to this kind of centralization when it comes to from the perspective of entry barrier between the two. And then there's, of course, security issues with proof of stake. So now mining gets something that's not inherent to the ecosystem, which is energy, or to be more precise, which is water or natural gas or sunlight, and converts these extrinsic um, resources into something intrinsic. So that makes it more secure. In proof of stake, it seems not like a security vulnerability that is inherent, which is that the thing that you're staking is also the thing that is being produced by staking it. So in a way, it's like a house of cards that could, if something goes wrong, it just all falls apart.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of content written about this, and this has obviously been a pretty fierce debate in the crypto community even to today. So I think we can dedicate another entire chat just to this alone. But for the purposes of, for the interest of time, I'd like to focus on some of the miner behavior, since this is a relatively opaque segment of the industry that people don't usually have access to. And one of the things that I personally am very curious about is, I think a lot of us are familiar with photos that circulated online a while back where we saw, ASICs filled with dust when they arrive in the mail for a lot of people who bought them. I forgot who exactly was shipping the ASICs, but is it a common practice based on your observations and interactions with miners for these kind of miners, large industrial miners, to use their own equipment before shipping them out? And if not, what is the guarantee there that, they wouldn't do that when they ship it out?
That's a good question, and a question or a concern we saw in retail clients, only retail clients, when I was at Bitmain. This is because of two reasons. I'll come to the second one first, which is people, these retail clients, when they are not able to make a big profit as they expected when they bought the miner, they try to find reasons for how their bet went wrong. And they're betting against many things. They're betting that no one else is buying the machines like they are. They are betting that Bitmain will stop selling the machine to others, like Bitmain sold the machine to them. So they're betting on a lot of variables that they cannot control. And when it happens, they try to find the one variable that they could control, or the one body or person that could have affected it, which is the manufacturer who they purchased the machine from. And they assume that all the time that they're losing money is someone taking away that money from them, which is the manufacturer mining with their machines. So that's a software aspect. Now, the first reason why I think they also feel that way is because there have been miners with dust on them. That's because in China, the pace of this industry, of the miner making industry, has been so fast. We've seen that, and that's also one of the reasons that they overtook the miner making industry in any other country in the world. They do not have time to, even maybe sometimes clean the machines after testing them. So when the machine is completed, they do a quick testing, maybe 1 week. That's very short compared to any other consumer electronics manufacturing industry, where something is running 24/7 and you just test it for maybe a week. Because they don't have the time. They are so incentivized to quickly ship it out and compete with other miner makers in China, and keep their customers happy and make a quick buck on the machine itself. And they have a good margins on the next gen machines, the machines that really are the topic of concern. People are not concerned about older generation machines not being shipped out on time, because manufacturer has surely not much incentive to do that. So yeah, they were tested for a few weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, and then ship it out. And while they are testing it, the conditions are dusty. It's not like server for us. It's not like other servers in telecom industry or elsewhere, where you have time to clean them, and also cleaning them matters, because here only the efficiency matters to the customer, not how dusty it is. And when I talk about customer, I don't mean retail customer, I mean majority of the customers, which are institutional miners. They only want to see the machine perform with the efficiency that the manufacturer claimed, and for longer time. Yeah, you have examples like Butterfly Labs, which did not have the dust issues, or did they? I don't think they had the dust issues, because they barely ever shipped out the machines, and which they did. They took all their sweet time in the world to clean them,
Yeah.
or maybe even mine themselves. Yeah, so that's another. So these were two reasons. Now, the explanation is that miners are incentivized to ship it out ASAP and make a big margin, instead of risking and betting on the cryptocurrency markets. And Butterfly Labs was a smaller company also, so big miners like Bitmain or others, they cannot afford to do that, because even if they do, it's a PR disaster. Someone will find out, because they have 1,000 employees employed. So many people will be involved in the operation. It's just counterproductive in so many ways. They're risking a lot of things instead of taking that profit, which is so easy to realize, risking assuming the cryptocurrency markets don't crash. And also why smaller manufacturers are more incentivized to do such things, which is also called secret mining in a way.
And I assume the margins for selling your machines is probably much better than mining, than just kind of using those machines to mine, right?
Again, that depends on cryptocurrency prices and a lot of variables. So any smart businessman or business would just choose to have that big fat profit margin on the machine, rather than bet on the cryptocurrency markets and mine for long term. And so in a way, yes to your question, because they would take maybe 6 months to break even. Or something. So yeah, compared to something they can get in 1 second.
Yeah. Got it. That's also interesting, because I'm always curious about how miners are actually managing their inventory risk, right? Are there kind of trading desk at the big miners? Do they trade crypto actively, or do they kind of just sell their Bitcoin right away after they mine it?
Both. So they want to sell the Bitcoin. Most of the miners I know, the bigger ones, sell most of the crypto they mine, because they have to pay bills. They have to pay real estate rents, or taxes, or incomes of the people working in the farm, things like that. And also because so many of these businesses are so big that they have so much at stake. They cannot just uh, bet on the cryptocurrency markets instead of keeping the money. So they prefer to sell most of it and bet a smaller portion. Having said that, this is what applies to majority, but there are surely miners who really believe in Bitcoin too much that they're ready to bet a lot of things on it and keep a lot of their crypto and not sell. So yeah, there's no hard and fast answer, but most of the case we see is the former.
Got it. Yeah, and I've also been seeing more OTC desks offer kind of sophisticated products like hash rate derivatives and
Yeah.
swaps for kind of miners to hedge. And I think the issue is just to fill the liquidity by finding people to take the other side of the trade. But I think that's growing. And I think we have a few audience questions, but before we move on to that, I'd like to throw a thorny question at you, which is something that has been discussed ever since the inception of Bitcoin. So block reward halving is coming up. And as we know, the block subsidy is going to trend lower over time every 4 years. So what happens to Bitcoin when block rewards go to zero? What are miners talking about? What are some solutions they may be proposing? I know there's been a lot of discussion about this. I think Hasu wrote a great paper on this recently, but I'm curious about what the miners are thinking about this.
Well, miners, I believe, when they started out, they saw this obvious problem before they invested multi-millions of dollars. And that is the problem that for Satoshi himself or themselves saw as well when they were writing the white paper, and which is that this is not a problem. So you have the transaction fees already covering about 6% of the block rewards, and the block rewards are going to be halved. And there are times in history when it has been half of the block rewards, almost half of the block rewards. Like in 2017, it's touched almost 50%. in end of 2017. When I say it touched, I mean the ratio of the percentage of the transaction fees in Satoshis compared to the block reward in Satoshis. Now, considering that and looking at the halving coming, I think it's going to be a bigger percentage in the future, and soon miners will not care too much about block rewards. Now, having said all that, Satoshi himself and everybody who believes this, what I said, agrees that we are assuming that Bitcoin's adoption will continue to increase and on-chain transactions will continue to increase. Now, that is very important for this to become a reality. And foreseeing that, people who adopted Bitcoin very early after reading the white paper are heavily promoting real world use cases. For example, BitPay is a great company that's working on increasing adoption of Bitcoin on-chain, increasing transactions, increasing usage. Bitcoin.com, in a way, is also doing similar stuff to increase usage. So assuming that Bitcoin's usage continues to increase, it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, and I think in that paper that I referenced with Hasu and a few Bitcoin researchers, they talked about things like improving block space and promoting perpetual issuance as potential solutions to alleviate that. But of course, this is an issue that's probably very, very far out in the future. I don't even know if I'll be around physically when it happens. But I think they're actually on this conference. So if you guys are interested, I think there's a panel on this actually. But just before we wrap up, I think there are quite a few questions. So I'm just opening the question segment here. Let's see if we can get to some of them. Starting with the first one. I think this is a question from Erin, and she asks, is halving affected by COVID-19, in your opinion, due to mining in China? I'm not sure what she means exactly by this.
Maybe she's referring to the price, effect on price.
Potentially, yeah. I'm curious what your take is. Are you seeing any disruptions in? I guess you mentioned in the beginning that mining is just coming back online in the beginning of April after kind of everything went offline during COVID-19, right?
Yeah, that's a very real way that it affected mining.
Right. So it seems like it's business back as usual. Personally, I don't think.
In China, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't think. So it's, for those of us who are not as familiar, the halving is a programmatic thing. It's not going to be affected by external events like COVID-19. And I think, as Nishant mentioned, business is coming back online, business as usual. I mean, especially in China, as the economy has opened up, I think for a few weeks now, right?
Yeah, for almost 2 months now.
Got it. Yeah. So it's not a concern that I see there. Another question is, why does Bitmain continue to mine Bitcoin Cash? This is a question from Aaron Shar.
I really don't know, but I don't know if Bitmain is the one mining, the one consciously choosing to mine Bitcoin Cash. Because from what I know, that Antpool and Bitmain's pools were one of the first to have introduced an automatic conversion algorithm, switching algorithm, which switched from BTC to BCH. So seeing that they pioneered this innovation where people can choose whatever is more profitable at one point of time, I doubt they would make a conscious decision to mine something that is not profitable. If we assume that, this is no secret that Bitmain's founder believed that Bitcoin's vision is to be used as a real world currency and see more use cases. And so they've been backing the block size increase since the block size debate, and thus and later backing Bitcoin Cash. But I do not think that this is the reason that they are mining Bitcoin Cash consciously.
Got it. And I think that's all the time we have. And just to wrap up, I think the last two questions here: what is the name of the podcast and the PR firm? The PR firm that Nishant, you're part of, is that you founded, is called Blocks Bridge, and the podcast that I host is called Block Crunch. So a lot of blocks there. But anyway, thank you everyone for your time. I think that's all the time we have. So back to you, Sinju.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
So much.
Thank you,
we're going to transition to next session now. This was fantastic. Really appreciate it.